You may come across some times where it's necessary for you to make a direct copy or a clone of some of your objects. And in this video, I will walk you through the steps of how you actually go about doing that. The way Snowflake works, which is different than a lot of traditional databases, it separates compute and storage. And the access layer is what allows you to interact with these things and pick and choose. With that said, when there's any sort of object, let's say a database or a table or a view, a schema, any of these things, that's really a pointer to some sort of underlying physical object in the storage. When we create a clone, we are just copying that pointer. And so by creating a new object, you're not actually adding any new data. It's just creating a new pointer, which is why when you create a clone initially, it does not add to your storage cost. And when you're selecting from it, yes, you're going to use compute resources because, maybe you have multiple queries and that requires compute, but the storage, the data itself, just because you created a clone is not doubling up your storage. Having said that, you have these two objects, but you write an insert statement or you delete something. That is where it will start to diverge from the original set. You could insert into this object, the original, and the clone will not have access to it. You can insert into the clone and the original will not have access to it. And finally, if you want to actually drop that clone, you're not going to lose everything that you have over here. Everything that was pointed to that clone, you'll no longer have access to. And that may be a little bit overkill if you're familiar with Snowflake, but I wanted to make sure we level set. So here we are in our Snowflake environment now, and over here you can see our objects. And if you remember, this is really a bunch of pointers to that underlying data, and here's where we select our compute. The first point I'll make is that in order to create a clone database, you need to have create database permissions on your account. And you can run this command here, show grants on account. The one we're concerned about here is create database, which is given to the sysadmin. So if you wanted to run this operation on a custom role, like a new one that you created, you need to make sure that you assign create database permissions on the account to that role. For this example, we'll just use account admin, which is inherits sysadmin, so it will work here. And what we'll do is we're going to run this syntax here. It's very simple. Create database, the name of the new clone database. So we'll call this DemoDB clone. The operation is clone. That's the action word here. And DemoDB is the name of the object that we're cloning here. Let's run this. And depending on the size of your database, this could take a little bit of time. And it says, okay, this was created successfully. Let's refresh. And now I can see here it is, DemoDB clone, and it looks exactly the same. Think back to those images. Did not add new data. We just simply created a new, what I like to think of as a pointer to that underlying data storage. We simply cloned the database and all child objects within it as they currently exist. And if you want to clone a table just at a specific time, there is syntax to do that as well. You can say clone a table at a certain time or before a certain time, or even based on a specific query ID, if you happen to know what that is. So what we'll do here is we're going to clone a specific table at a specific time. And we're going to say basically anything at or before this date, let's clone it. We'll be cloning a table called DBT audits. If you've watched some of the other videos, this will look familiar. There are some records here that were created on the 30th, so we should have a few less rows. Let's go ahead and run this. Success. Now let's refresh. We can see the clone, and if we look here, there are 11 rows here and 16 rows on the original. If we preview this, we can see that all of those ones that were created on the 30th, which technically, because this is just looking at the date and not a timestamp, those did not make it. So that's how you could clone a table or another object at a specific time. Next, we'll take a look at grants and what gets copied over when you do these clones. For the most part, a lot of the permissions do get copied over with the exception of the source object itself, which for an example here would be our database. If we take a look at the grants for the database, we can see that there's a few grants here. One we'll look at here is analyst, but if we look at the grants to the clone, almost all of those go away, meaning those did not get copied over. And if we were to switch over to that analyst role, as an example, we no longer see that clone database over here. Let's go back. Let's take a look at the staging schema. We can see analyst here. If we look at the clone, it still exists there as well. And if we look at one of the example tables we have, the same is true. It does copy over. So again, the database, the original source object, did not copy those grants, but the children items, everything that was with it, did copy over. If you wanted to actually give that other role permission, you can run this script. If you're not familiar with how the access control works, there's another video in this playlist that does break that down. But now that we've granted that, let's switch over to Analyst. Now we can see this database and a couple of the tables within it. And as I noted here, it still keeps the other permissions intact. On the original database here, it only had these permissions, and that carried over to the clone. The only thing we had to change there was give it access to that new database itself. The last thing I'll point out here is the underlying data definition that gets inherited when you do this clone. So, if you're cloning something that has a view or a stored procedure, there's scripts involved there. It's not just a straight object. But what happens here is they do get cloned over exactly as they are. And this is where it's important to make sure you have fully qualified references within your view definition or your stored procedure so that when it copies over, that gets inherited and everything works as expected. And if you're using dbt, which is another tool we talk a lot about on this channel, that does it by default so you don't have any issues. So let's take a look at an example view here. We're just going to union the definition of the original view here from DemoDB and then the DemoDB clone view. And you can see that they are identical. There was nothing changed. And the reference is fully qualified. So we have database, schema, name of the model, and we're all good there. So that'll do it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, feel free to give a like on the video. It really does help the channel. And if you really like it, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.